The Cleveland Cavaliers won their first playoff series since the departure of LeBron James in 2018, and actually their first playoff series win without LeBron James since 1993, back when Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls were on the road to winning their third straight championship. Over 30 years since the franchise could claim a playoff series win without LeBron James, something that should be celebrated and viewed as a success for a team that has been trying to recover in a post-LeBron world where they were used to going to the finals nearly every season with him. But while Cavs fans should be happy with the progress being made and actually having one of the more competitive first-round series in the playoffs this year, it hasn't been all joy and happiness for this franchise. In fact, quite the opposite, with much bigger problems than you would expect, with a lot of uncertainty going into the offseason after being eliminated in the East semis in 5 games, an offseason that will define the future and direction of this franchise going forward. So let's talk about it. As always, if you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, it would mean a great deal to me if you subscribe to help the channel grow, and in return, I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, when the Cavs made a blockbuster trade to land Jazz star and Donovan Mitchell, a player most had expected would be traded, with the Jazz looking to pivot in a new direction after failing to make a deep playoff run in the playoffs, and with Gobert being moved to the Timberwolves, the writing was on the wall that Donovan Mitchell would likely be on his way out as well. But most had assumed Mitchell would be going to a bigger market, most notably the Knicks or another contending team that just needed that extra star power to get them over the hump. And so when the Cavs came swooping into the Donovan Mitchell trade sweepstakes and struck a deal with the Jazz to acquire him, most were surprised by this news.
You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? Every single time, man.
That is until we saw the actual haul the Jazz were able to get in return for Donovan Mitchell, where the Jazz received Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton, Ochai Agbaji, a player the Cavs just had selected with the 14th overall pick in that draft and hadn't even played yet. So 3 players, all young players, and 3 unprotected first-round picks in 2025, 27, and 29, as well as 2 pick swaps controlled by the Jazz in 2026 and 28. 3 young players, 1 who would go on to become an all-star for the Jazz, and 3 unprotected picks which have not been realized yet. This, of course, after the Jazz acquired 4, really 5 if you also include Walker Kessler, in the trade for Rudy Gobert. And so for the Cavs, on paper, this looked great. A young up-and-coming team that had this budding star at the time in Darius Garland, and actually Jarret Allen, now that I think about it, who was also selected as an all-star that season prior to making the Donovan Mitchell trade, and Evan Mobley probably should have won over Scottie Barnes and had already shown great promise as a defensive player at just 20 years of age. And you take a team that had just fallen short of the playoffs, being a young and inexperienced team, and you add Donovan Mitchell, a more proven player, flawed in some regards, which I'll speak to, but adding a star in his prime to put alongside this young supporting cast seemed like an incredible move at the time. Now, for me personally, I didn't like this trade when it happened because I thought the Cavs were giving up way too much to get Donovan Mitchell, who in my view of what we saw from him with the Jazz had kind of already hit his ceiling, and oftentimes would get too much tunnel vision and didn't impact winning when it meant the most in the playoffs. A great player, no question, but 3 first-round picks and 3 young players is a bit steep for Donovan Mitchell. But then again, I'm always of the opinion that you should never trade your entire future with multiple unprotected first-round picks for just one guy. But regardless, fast forward 2 years later since the trade, and the Cavs have no doubt been better since they were before the trade. They've been a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference on both seasons. Last year, they did get beaten down badly by the Knicks in the first round of the playoffs, and then this year, they had an impressive series against the Magic, winning that one in 7 games, and doing so without Jarret Allen for a good portion of it. But even despite the improvement, you can't sit here and say that this team is a title contender, or even has the possibility of being a title contender in the near future. A good team, but still flawed, especially on offense. They take a lot of threes, but don't hit them at an efficient clip, and sometimes shoot themselves out of games. They play with pretty slow pace overall, 22nd in the league last season in pace, which results in less possessions and less shot attempts compared to their opponent, which means they have to be very efficient on offense when their opponent is getting up 5 or 6 more shots than they are. And despite their size in the post with Allen and Mobley, they don't get as many offensive boards and second chance points. They were bottom 10 in the league in both of those categories. So you look at this roster and you see that as they are currently constructed, they aren't going to win a title. Yeah, they'll be a playoff team, but their ceiling in the East is really a second round exit. At best, a conference finals out. So the question is, well, where do they go from here? And of course, the biggest question on everyone's mind and the biggest problem that presents itself to the Cavs in their future is what's going to happen with Donovan Mitchell. Is he going to want to stick around long term? Like, yes, there are other problems in Cleveland, like players apparently being unhappy with Jarret Allen and him not playing through the pain of his rib injury in the playoffs, how he could have taken an injection to help with the pain, but he chose not to play, apparently, allegedly. Yes, the Cavs are in a tight spot with their cap sheet and have to decide on contract extensions for Evan Mobley, Jarret Allen, and Caris LeVert this summer, as all 3 of them are going to be going into expiring deals come next season. But the biggest issue, the biggest uncertainty is Donovan Mitchell. And it's not only because there's a risk of losing their best player if he demands a trade or plays the final year of his deal in this upcoming season, declines his player option, and walks as a free agent in 2025, because you could argue, maybe the Cavs would actually play better team basketball overall without Donovan Mitchell. But the reason it's a bigger issue than just losing your best player is that you gave up so much to get this guy. The Utah Jazz control your future through 2029, and that's not a problem if you're keeping Donovan Mitchell and you're sending them mid to late first round picks. But if Mitchell leaves and you can't get extensions for Jarret Allen done, maybe you overpay Mobley beyond what he's worth, and you have Garland be the lead guard again, there is a world where if a few things go wrong, some injuries to players, and you're in the lottery for a couple of seasons, this team goes nowhere and you're forced to go in another direction, you could very well see some high draft picks that you have to fork over to the Utah Jazz, potentially top 5 picks, because again, no protections on any of those picks. And look, I know the media has been blowing it out of proportion a bit as far as Mitchell not being happy in Cleveland, how he's always wanted to play in either New York or Brooklyn. They've almost built this narrative that it's a foregone conclusion that Mitchell is going to request a trade this summer and he'll be heading elsewhere. I don't think it's at that level, because the Cavs overall are still a good team. It would be one thing if they were seeing the play-in every year and not making the playoffs, but they're a top 4 team in the East and a very good team when healthy. But if next season we see kind of the same thing, or worse, the Cavs regress, yeah, there's a world where Mitchell says, okay, I don't see myself winning with this team. I'm declining my player option and I'm going to test unrestricted free agency. And in my view, that's actually the worst case scenario for the Cavs, because then their hands are tied and potentially not being able to get anything back for him in return unless they do a sign and trade, which the team trading out their better player is always going to get the short end of the stick in those transactions in a sign and trade. And so if I'm the Cavs, rather than just kicking the can down the road and hoping that this team suddenly figures it out and becomes contenders, hoping for these breakout seasons from Evan Mobley and Isaac Okoro, knowing that this team likely has hit its ceiling and you're more or less going to be in the same position you were next season, if I'm the Cavs, I'm looking at all opportunities to trade Donovan Mitchell. You're not going to get the same type of package you sent out to acquire him, because honestly, I don't think you're really going to be seeing much of that and those types of hauls being dealt anymore in the NBA, where you mortgage so much of your future on just one player. We've seen too many examples of that gone wrong in the NBA. But regardless, he's 27, in the peak of his prime, a big name, a big time scorer, a #1 option. Yeah, you'll get a solid return, especially with the way some of these teams that had high expectations going into the season fell short in the postseason. Teams that might be desperate enough to make an all-in type move like that. But honestly, I feel like the Cavs aren't going to take that risk. They're not going to be reactionary and just ship out Donovan Mitchell this summer. Not when their team is still so young, has a lot of talent. And yeah, you could see Donovan Mitchell maybe stringing them along a little bit, saying he's happy in Cleveland and wants to continue building on what they have going. But I don't really believe that. Small market team, he likes the big lights. He wants to be a big name in a big market. It would be one thing if the Cavs were winning and showing true promise of contending for a title in the near future, but by the end of the next season, unless there are drastic changes to this roster, it's going to be more of the same from this group. Now, I know some will say, well, why can't the Cavs just upgrade their roster and keep building around the core they have, with Mitchell being the #1 option? Why can't this roster straight up improve? Well, the problem for the Cavs is most teams that are kind of on the edge of contending and just need a few more pieces to get them over the top, they trade future assets to get win now type players, whether that's adding current stars or high level role players to their team. The Cavs don't really have a lot of tradable assets. The soonest first round pick they can trade is in 2031. They have limited second round draft capital, and they don't have any standout young players they could use as trade bait outside of Evan Mobley, who I really don't think they're going to trade because they view him as part of their long-term future. Sure, they could trade Darius Garland, but his stock is really low right now considering how he played in the playoffs, not always being available to play, and a massive contract where he's going to be getting paid all the way through 2028 with over $150 million still guaranteed to him. So this isn't a scenario in which the Cavs can just easily upgrade their roster by way of trades. They have limited trade chips to actually make an enticing offer to a team to upgrade their roster. And then from a cap perspective, the Cavs are already an over the cap team. They have $161 million committed next season if you also include the salary for their upcoming first round pick. They're only $10 million below the luxury tax without factoring in a potential extension for Isaac Okoro, who is a restricted free agent. So the only way they can improve via free agency is by using the mid-level exception, which if they want to use all of it, it would put them into the luxury tax. And if your ownership, does it really make sense to go into the tax for this team? The free agent class for this summer isn't the best either, at least for players at the mid-level, which is all they're going to be able to afford at this point. And then again, Allen, LeVert, Mobley are all extension eligible. What kind of deals are they going to give them? LeVert, they likely wait and see how he performs this season and assess whether it makes sense to extend him at the end of next season before he hits free agency. But with Jarret Allen and Evan Mobley, especially Mobley, who they have a deadline to offer him an extension before the start of this upcoming season, can they really risk both of those guys hitting free agency in 2025? Allen unrestricted, Mobley restricted, and potentially losing one or both if they get better offers elsewhere that the Cavs are going to be unwilling or unable to match. And then on top of above all of that, you could have Donovan Mitchell hitting unrestricted free agency should he decline his player option. And look, if you're the Cavs, they really don't have an option of quote-unquote tanking or resetting and rebuilding. They have no control over their picks for the next 6 years. Losing and getting into the lottery only benefits the Jazz at this point. So yes, while it was a solid season for the Cavs, the best they've had since LeBron James left, it's actually leaving them with more uncertainty because they're not good enough to truly contend, but not bad enough either to where they need to move in another direction right away. That said though, I would love to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.